So we're here at the beautiful Capella Hotel in Singapore, where we've just finished Critical Eye Asia's 2-day leadership retreat, where we've spent our time with business leaders, really talking about the key topics of the day. I'm joined here by Mui Hoon Po, who's one of Critical Eye's board mentors, and we're just going to reflect a little bit and talk about, you know, the value of the space that we've created here and some of the key highlights that come out of it. So let's start with the highlights, right? And then we'll talk about the space. So what for you, what were your outtakes, if you like?
Yeah, let's talk about the highlights. What's the highlights for me? I think I always look forward to these events because of two things, right?
Yeah.
One is the connectivity with a group of people here, both at the board mentor level and also at the people who's coming together, the executives, the senior executives who are coming here to learn. I think the second thing that stands out for me is also the knowledge sharing, right? The authenticity that, you know, the panel share, and I think the questions that elicit even more out of the panels. Yeah. So those are the two things, right? The human connectivity and actually the knowledge.
But why is that important?
So this retreats face to face, right? I mean, it's really important because it creates that safe space for senior executives to kind of voice their thoughts, right? What keeps them awake at night, right? And I think the mix of the people that you have around the room has got different, they are different, right? You have board mentors who have walked the journey before. You have senior executives who are thinking about the next step. So that mix really works because it's about sharing what the journey has been. And I think for even the board mentors, I think we gain a perspective of the thinking, right, around the room. And that's really important in our work as board directors too. As a senior executive, you want to kind of see what's the journey looking like and what should I consider? And that mix of interaction is really key to the success of this kind of retreats.
And I think probably the ability to challenge each other and where you've got that permission.
Yes.
You know, I think that's important. So okay, but what about the content then? So, you know, what would be the outtakes from that point of view? You know, not so much the highlights of the whole thing, but what would be some of the key things that you've taken out?
So key things that comes out of these 2 days, I think geopolitical uncertainty is top agenda, right? Everybody's talking about that, right? And how, as boards and as senior management team, you should be navigating that. Yeah. And I think the stories coming across resonates. Everybody's dealing with that, but in kind of their own different ways, right? Yeah. I think the second piece that everybody's also talking about would be AI and digitalization, and probably more AI, right? And what do you do about this new technology that seems to be compressing competitive cycles and everything else, right? So that's the second theme that's kind of emerging. So it's kind of tied to the whole area of reinvention, and transformation, right? Yeah. And the third area I think would be around the people, right? Because how do you build that talent depth within the organization? And it's not only about building the talent depth, right? It's really also about, if you're doing reinvention or transformation, how do you kind of get a buy-in? And I think a lot of what's coming out from the 2 days is about the why. Over communicate that. Yeah. All right, you can say the what, but that sounds a bit like a campaign around the organization. So I think it's the why that's going to resonate, and you can't over communicate that. You have to keep drumming that, right? And that's really important.
So do you think, I mean, you're talking about reinvention there, right? We talk about continuous change a lot in the community, disruption, all that. That came up a lot over the last 2 days. Do you feel that companies are kind of capable at the moment, you know, of coping with that?
I think.
Did you feel encouraged?
I feel encouraged, but I would say that different types of companies will be prepared for it in a different way.
Yeah.
I mean, those with more resources, you're obviously able to pad a lot more resilience into this,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
But those have less resources, you got to figure out a clever way to stay resilient and to read the signs, right? So I would say that the companies are not totally prepared, and they're probably thinking very hard about how they can become more and more resilient, especially in this kind of uncertain environment.
Does that require a different kind of way of leading, maybe? Does it require a different, I mean, I know you're talking about different size companies, right? But a different sort of structure, different approach to the structure?
I would say that it requires leadership that is sensitive to the geopolitical situation and perhaps even fluency in it, right? I mean, to be able to read the signals that's coming, right? And the sort of leadership that's going to lead us into the future will be the sort that understands AI and digital. You can't quite ignore that, because that has to be embedded into your overall strategy and not almost like an afterthought. So two things, right? The geopolitical uncertainty and the AI stuff all needs to be baked in your strategy. It cannot be like outside of the strategy. And I think just talking about that, you know, we talk about, I mean, there was a good example at the retreat, like five-year strategy plans are passé, right? And so what is in, right? I think the fact that the competitive cycles are compressed does mean that board and management has to work much closer together, right? And that means having a long-range view, but at the same time having very, very disciplined review cycles, perhaps quarterly, right? Because that's the only way the board and the management can work together to kind of course correct if the signals are not what you have expected, or even pivot if you kind of like think that it's no longer valid, that whatever you have thought you were going to go and achieve may not be what it should be, right?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where I was going about different way to lead, right? You know, because that's a different way of thinking.
Yeah,
because it's a more collaborative way of thinking across the ExCo and with the board, etc., etc.
Exactly.
But it's sort of, in some ways, it's throwing away the old playbook that we've all learned. So it's a different way. You know, you need to be more adaptive. So maybe, if you like, a last question for you.
Sure.
Is, do you think leadership is evolving in a particular direction? I mean, I'm talking about this region, but you know, it could be broader than that. Where do you think leadership's going, if that's not too broad a question? Well,
I would say that the mindset has got to be about being able to deal with the ambiguity that's coming at us, right? And I think there was a big session also on the risk, and the risk is coming in ripples, and how do you deal with it? How do you sense that, right? So if you think about what's important is in the resilience, is really you must be able to have the intelligence around the organization to understand what's coming at you and to be able to red flag if there's a risk coming along, right? I think that's really important. And culturally, I think culture is a big thing that has been discussed over the last 2 days, right? And how do you build that culture? Culture just doesn't turn up the next day, right? So there must be a clarity both at the board level and the senior management level about what that culture is for this organization, because that is the soul or the DNA.
So without that, you can't adapt. Yeah, and I think there's a bit there about, you know, the comfort with being able to adapt, which I think is evolving, but it's rare, isn't it? And I think it's that ability to make decisions with less. Is that fair?
Exactly. Somebody said something about flying, and you know, like you're in flight and you have to kind of change the culture as you're in flight. And that's pretty much the situation, right?
Yeah.
That we're in. That you can't wait for things to happen and then you change, right? You can't, you know. So it's a lot of parallels.
I've heard one. I forget where I heard it. Somebody said, "Perfect is the enemy of good."
Yeah.
I think that's probably a good way to sum it up.
That's true, Andrew.
Thank you, Moo Hoon.
Thank you, Andrew.
Very much for your insights. We look forward to the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you.